All right. My name is Daniel Bryant, and the owner and creator of Me, Motivated and Empowered. And this is the hour to empower the man in me, a special episode directly and specifically for the growth and the empowerment of men. Father's Day is tomorrow, so we wanted to make sure that we give a little light to the great men in our lives, the great men that we know and experience every day. So this call will be able to give you empowerment, to give you the things that you need to be able to get throughout your week, things that you can share, network with other people. We'll be speaking about a wide range of topics that I'm very excited about with our great panelists. And so, without further ado, we're going to get started. With that, to get started, we are going to start off with introductions by all of our panelists. And so, if we can go around the room and just panelists, Mr. Rodgers, Mr. Wright, whoever wants to start. If you could just give a little bit about yourself, your name, any affiliations and organizations that you're a part of, and can you please just start things off?
All right, I'll start. First, I want to say good morning or good evening to everyone, not just the panelists, but everyone who's participating, zooming in. My name is Savalas Rodgers. I am the founder of POPS. It's a support group on Facebook. POPS stands for Parenting Other People's Seed. And I'm also the co-founder of Key Players, along with my wife, which is a group for married couples where we specialize in married and relationship coaching. So I'm excited to be here, and I want to wish everybody happy Father's Day who's up here.
All right, Mr. Wright, if you could come up next and introduce yourself.
And how you doing, everybody, on this momentous weekend? Glad, first of all, that for the Juneteenth, first time we had a holiday, and for all the fathers, for it to be on Father's Day, and for us to even be able to talk about the topic of fatherhood is good, and especially at this time. So I hope everybody would take away some good tidbits from this. I'm an Air Force veteran, postal clerk now for the last 3 decades plus. I guess that's a little long. But other than that, glad to be here and hope I can share some good info and receive.
Mr. Cook, if you could share.
Sure. Be glad to. Yeah, my name is Andy Cook, and I am married, father of 2 girls, ages 30 and 27, and also the grandfather of a grandson who's about 18 months old. I've been in the area for a number of years, we'll say. Was in banking for a long time, and then became a financial advisor with Edward Jones several years ago. Actually met Brian and John through Gina, and because my wife bikes, and she bikes and does a lot of other things, but in any case, that's how I got to know those folks. And yeah, I'm looking forward to picking up some good tips today.
And Mr. Swanson, if you could share with us.
I'm Tyler Swanson, a former Wake County public school teacher. I actually had the pleasure of being a part of the swag group with Daniel and John when I taught at Enloe. And so it's always great to see former students doing amazing things. I'm also a candidate for Wake County Board of Education, and so honored to be here, and also happy Father's Day to those who are fathers.
And Pastor Wesley Morris, if you could share with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Reverend Wesley Morris. I'm excited to be here. This is a powerful weekend, and I'm a son, so happy Father's Day to my father and all the fathers that are on the call. I am the pastor of Faith Community Church here in Greensboro, always lifting up the beloved community center, the home where I learned about community organizing and what it meant to serve in this community. And so I'm just really happy to be here with everybody. Also a proud graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, and excited for this conversation to begin.
All right, well, that's everyone. So, John, if you could lead things off with our first topic for today, starting with fatherhood.
Yeah, so let's start this conversation with our first topic of fatherhood. If Mr. Rodgers could start off with his meaning of the importance of fatherhood, and then Mr. Wright will follow.
The importance of fatherhood from my experience with it is how strong of an impact that we have on the lives of our children. As fathers, I see ourselves as guides to our children. Sometimes I think as fathers, we underestimate our value in kids' lives. We're more than just grass cutters and painters, and we're more than just bug killers. And I think sometimes we minimize just how important our role is in our kids' life, in the community in general. I think a lot of times some of the issues that we see on a daily basis, whether you're watching the news or whether you're traveling up and down your streets or neighborhood, is the result of a lack of father figures or fatherhood in those kids or children's lives. So I think being a fatherhood, we have to see ourselves as guides to these kids, and just showing them and pointing them in the right direction, and just our presence and being in their lives. Sometimes I did a video, I think maybe 2 years ago, that sometimes we put more emphasis on presence, presents, as opposed to our presence being in their lives. And the reason I can say that is because my dad and the impact that he had on me, that he didn't buy a lot of stuff. I didn't want a lot of stuff. He didn't always come home with boxes and bags and sneakers and all that stuff, but he came home. And just the fact that he was always there, it just gave me an advantage when I became a dad and when I became a husband and when I had to be the head of a house. It just gave me such a solid foundation. So man, it is just so important that we just take on our role as fathers and don't underestimate the value that you bring to your kids' lives. So that's what I would say.
All right, Mr. Wright, if you could share your piece.
Okay. Well, first of all, like I say, to me, being a father is probably the most important job, not probably, but is the most important job that any man could ever want and aspire to be. And I was so grateful when I finally had my young man. And not only do I feel and felt the gratitude of having him as a son, but also any of his friends or any of the kids who I am able to come in contact with. I want to always be able to be that beacon of trying to show them how a man should be, how he should walk, how he should talk, how he should stand, how he should carry himself. And you're going to always be a product of your environment. And I think we as fathers are the ground builders of that product, be it you're my child or you're not. Because I want to try to keep a positive image on fatherhood, because it is so important, not just for sons, but for daughters as well.
Will there be any other comments from any other panelists?
Yeah, just one word for the girl dads out there, which I am, and that's that. I think one of the things I didn't think about early on was that I want my daughters to pick men who will be good fathers for their children if they're fortunate enough to have children. And so I think that's another reason that that the role is important. The other thing I think is important is to realize, I was young and didn't know a lot when we had our first child. And I think we need to give ourselves a lot of grace in looking back, because you will make mistakes as a father. And there is a verse in scripture, something to the effect of, God looks after widows and fools, or something to that effect. The pastor can correct me on that, but I'm not a widow, but I have acted like a fool at times, and things managed to work out. So I think you learn from your mistakes and move on, ask for forgiveness, and That's just my quick and dirty.
Will there be any other comments from any other panelists?
Hi, good afternoon. I agree with what the first guy said. The father is one of the first role models that a child will be involved with, and the father and the mother before teachers and grandparents and all of that. So it is very important, to try to walk that line and be that example, for your children to follow, whether it's a son or a daughter.
Now, I'm sorry.
Would any of the other participants would like to share on their importance of fatherhood?
Let's now transition into our next topic of community empowerment. If Pastor Wesley Morris and Mr. Tyler Swanson could give some steps that us men can take to grow and strengthen our community.
I'll go ahead and get us started. And then I'm so glad to be doing this with Tyler, who I have worked with personally and been in community with. And even on the first topic, I want to just point something out that we were sharing about the relational aspect of human beings working together. And that is where I begin when I discuss community. And I have a saying that says, no one comes from nowhere, everything comes from somewhere. So in some sense, none of us make ourselves by ourselves. So it takes a network of relationships, even to speak how I speak. My accent comes from different relationships that I've built, where I was born, certain sayings that I have. You've heard me already say a quote. I learned that in community. And I also learned that there are challenges when you are working in community. It's not as hard to pick what you want to eat if you're doing that by yourself. But if you try to plan for 3 or 4 people and ask them what they want to do, be ready and be prepared to have a discussion. What I mean by that is, while it might be easy to kind of fall back into your close network of friends, the ones that you agree with, ones that you are familiar with, it is a big challenge for men in community to go outside of those bounds and reach out and build relationship. There's a youth pastor kind of phrase, we say, rules without relationships lead to rebellion. And what that means, if I'm talking about what needs to be done, or this is wrong, and youth of today or older people need to do this, and I'm not building relationships, I can't expect my words or my rules or what I believe to even be received. What I can actually believe is going to happen is rebellion. In some sense, if we don't have deep relationships, it's hard to communicate some very difficult things. And I, like you, live at a time where I say the world around us is facing some difficult times. And so if you're in community, I just want to point out a couple of things. If you're having a problem, I would say the first step is to say that you're not alone in that problem or that issue. Over the course of history, there are many people who have had the same problem you're having. I think one opportunity we have is to find out who else is in common with that problem so we can find out some common solutions. That takes a real ability to be able to listen deeply. Now, listening deeply is something that I practice to this day that works in communication in close relationships or longer relationships. And communication, I can tell you something and I can work on saying it the right way. But if I don't know how to hear correctly, then it defeats the purpose. Have you ever been in a situation with what you're saying is you say it and you believe it and you know what you said, but the other person actually hears something radically different? That is a challenge in community. And when we are founded in these communities where we hear the news of the day, we read the newspaper, and Lord knows social media plays a role in projecting the idea of who we are and what we are to believe. It is important to figure out what is the truth. And I think as a man, it is very important for me to be a role model in some regards, but not a role model trying to fit an expectation that is out there, but it's a role model in fitting who God created and made me to be. The role model is the person that you are, your uniqueness, your challenges, your flaws. And I was so happy to already hear some vulnerabilities saying that, I wasn't prepared at this stage, or I wondered, I had some doubt, I battled here, and, I had some struggles, but we all can say this one true thing, that we are here today. One last note on community, and then I'll pass it on over to Tyler, is that our awareness of that we are in community makes a difference. That means that there's an election season that comes up every now and again. That also means on a kind of a smaller scale that there's a certain pattern to how often the trash man comes around. And I have to think about that. Who's taking the trash can now? If you forget, you have to wait another week. And there's these kinds of awarenesses that can go on that scale of thinking about household duties, their neighborhood responsibilities. Also, there's some bigger scale in terms of voting that impact not only cities and states and regions, but the whole nation. And our awareness of these issues, and then having the ability to have courage to act on the truth, which actually takes a process of listening deeply, figuring out where something begins and where it ends, and then also volunteering your time. We all have that pocket of time where we could be doing something else other than giving of service to your neighbor. And so to build community is acts of service, words of affirmation, being in touch with your neighbors, and learning these very hard lessons. When I got to the age I am now, I had to go back and apologize to a few people. I think that that's a big part of community. I had to say, listen, I judged you a little bit too harshly. I didn't understand from your perspective back then, but I know a little bit more now, and I want to ask you to forgive me. And then another part is being courageous in starting new initiatives. I'm so proud of Daniel pulling us together. This is a new initiative. You have to be able to step out into community and say, I have some gifts and I have a purpose, and I want to contribute what I have to this community. And so I think a lot about having a positive attitude, knowing that you're going to make some mistakes and some challenges, and I didn't get here by myself. And so I realized that I'm a product and I'm born of my community, both the successes and the challenges. So taking all that together, I just want to say thank you. And community is really built on grace, being able to accept the grace of others and the grace of God.
Always hard to follow up with a pastor, I have to say that. And it's also great to be in community with you all. I've learned a lot of my great lessons from Wesley and, from beloved community centers, where I think I used to refer to it as Greensboro's Highlander, because oftentimes when you have to, well, let me stick with my notes before I start going off script. But I'm too reminded of a quote that Dr. King once said, that everyone can be great because everyone can serve. All we need is a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And oftentimes that service that we put into our communities, we don't expect anything in return. If we're trying to build communities and trying to really be genuine about what we're trying to do, we do it without expecting anything. I think oftentimes folks, service is not about what you can reap, it's about what we're leaving for next generations. And I often think about, I'm a proud alum of North Carolina A&T as well. And so when I look at our HBCUs are rooted in service. The facts are, our HBCUs actually instill in us that once you get your degrees, that your job is to go back to your community. And as you're pulling yourself up by a ladder, you're reaching back and pulling those up along with you. And so what that also reminds me of is that we're all in this together. And one thing I've known is that this pandemic has shown us the importance of community, and that we can't, when we're in isolation, it's scary, it's dark, we're very vulnerable in those moments, but we have to surround ourselves with folks who not necessarily always think the way that you think, but also challenges you to dream more, to do more, and to be better. And also, there's lessons in every community. And I've learned some of the best lessons in my career from having conversations with older folks who have done the work that we're trying to do, who have lessons that, you know, folks don't really get to ask those questions. And so I think we all in our communities have the ability to learn. And we also have the abilities as we're building community to break curses and to reimagine what we can do together. I worked at the North Carolina ACP under Dr. Barber's leadership. And one thing that I learned, and a quote that he often says, is that it's not what one person can do alone. It's what we can do together when we come together, when we pray together, when we struggle together, when we dream together. And to take it a little step further, since we are here and this is Father's Day, Reverend Nelson Johnson has a great saying that says we have to walk together, brothers and sisters. And in that story, our stories and our journeys are all different, but our purposes are all aligned. And so as we begin, you know, our journey, is always great to have these meetings, but we also have to have some great call to actions. And those call to actions simply means with the knowledge that you have, the gifts that you have, what are you going to do with those gifts and with those talents to make this world a little bit better? Because when you go by the graveyards, you will see a lot of talent that is left there, that folks didn't really get to use all their talents. They didn't get to share those gifts and those knowledges. So I want to challenge all of us on this call that don't sit back and allow those gifts and those dreams just to die. You know, when we look through, and I think throughout our nation's history, there's always this, you know, there's always communities that's always centered there, but there's often these tales where you see these generational divides where young versus old. And in this day and age, we all have to come together. We all have to walk together. And I think through Common's lyrics of Glory, where he says it takes the wisdom of the elders and the energy of the young folks. And that now more than ever has shown that we have power. And quite honestly, if we did not have power, and if we did not have true powers in our communities, we would not see the systemic attacks that we are witnessing day by day. The attacks on our voting rights, the attacks on our health, the attacks on you know, all of these interlocking injustices that we are facing is because of the power that we have as a collective body. And once we begin to see how powerful we truly are, that is when we can dare to get in some great and necessary trouble. And so we have an election coming up every year. It's great to vote in those presidential elections, but however, those local elections are the most critical. And what we do, and everyone at the age of 18, you know, go and vote. If you have young kids, one thing that my parents used to do when I was young is to take me to the polls, to get to instill those lessons and those journeys, because as Black men and Black folks, we only received the right to vote in 1965, less than 60 years ago. You know, so those gifts that someone had dared and to struggle for us to have, those rights that we have, that we can't allow those rights to be taken back. And so it takes all of us to build those communities. And as I close, you know, this here, Daniel, is truly a blessing, because the fact that we can pull men and women together on this holiday, you know, we're going into two important holidays, Juneteenth and Father's Day. We have an opportunity to really build and to really imagine the changes that we want to see in our communities. And so I just want to leave with this last little quote, and then I'm going to stop talking. But service is the rent that we pay to live on this earth. And we all have a beginning and an end. But the most important piece is that dash in between our birth and our death. So use that dash, make the best of your ability to be an impact in your community, to leave a legacy that others will only imagine, that others can't even imagine what it is. So that is my task, and I'm holding myself accountable to that as well, because that's the other part of community, is holding not only your community to get accountable, but yourself as well.
Any questions from our participants regarding call to action or how they can take up to growing their community?
Well, I would like to say one other thing as far as our community. What we need to also, and that community and fatherhood all ties in. I just think we ought to always make sure that we're inputting and seeking for truth. And that's, I mean, truth from media. You know, what is the truth when we're speaking to our kids? You know, because the hardest thing to do is to recapture trust and respect when somebody felt that, oh, well, he didn't tell me the truth. You know, and it's one thing I've always tried to make sure I do to my son and to anybody that I'm involved with, is let them know that I'm somebody that you can believe in when I say what I'm saying is the truth. And that if I don't know the truth, then I'm not going to spout a bunch of lies or something untruths. Because you can see in our world today, a lot of problems have been created from just folks not willing to accept or tell the truth. And if you put that good seed in good soil, which is your child, son or daughter, then I think we're going to see a lot of the other problems that we have seen later on not be so great. Because I think the characteristics as what we build in that kid is going to be your next doctor, lawyer, teacher, president.
That's a great point. And follow-up question regarding that trust and that truth for Reverend Morris. If you could just speak to a little bit about of the younger generation, how can we feel like we're involved? I know a lot of times we kind of shy away of action because of our age or because we don't, match the qualifications because we're not a certain age. So how can young people either start a conversation or be in the call of action to be able to build our community?
Well, Tyler's probably a little bit closer to the age group, but I'll say this, that I would say to start, just start. We used to hold intergenerational conversations. Our first one that I was ever participated in was actually in 2008 in East White Oak community here in Greensboro. And we had folks sitting in the big circle, and we asked some of the most basic questions about what did you used to do for fun when you were our age? And then some of the young folks shared what did they used to do for fun? And we realized that there were intersections that we didn't realize. They asked, what are some of your favorite foods back then? And they said, oh, well, those are some of our favorite foods. And so there's a phrase that we don't believe and don't operate in unauthorized separation. And that means that there is a way that we've been taught that we're so different or that we're separate from one another. The challenge is when you actually do meet and say, okay, I really want to participate, I want to be a part of this community. Sometimes communities have norms. And some norms are that the young people, they need to learn, they need to sit and just take it in for a little while. And that is true. There is a phase where we need to learn some things. Other norms are that if you show some promise and you get out here and you're actively communicating with folks, somebody will say, well, hey, come on, let me show you a little bit more and open up a way for you. But I would say the biggest thing is mutual respect. Being able to respect somebody means that I will shake your hand, I'll look at you in the eye, I'll listen to you, I'll give you your time to speak, and then also I'll take some time to listen. And I also speak when it's my time to speak. And so being a part of the community is learning how the community changes, how it evolves, and how to get in. But there's no better way to start than to just start. Just start the conversation. And if you're blessed by being able to know somebody who's a little bit advanced in that community, go ask them and say, and keep trying. Don't give up. That's one of my wife's qualities that I love about her so much. She just will not give up. Don't give up. If you actually believe in something, if you get deterred from it, or if you get pushed aside, or somebody says, that won't work, that doesn't mean that it's over. Keep trying as long as it's a just cause, as long as it's something that's righteous, it's something that you feel has been put in your heart. Don't quit, keep trying. And if it's another person, go to the next person. And so those are some of the qualities that I think particularly young people can show. Some of that courage, some of that stick to it, some of that not giving up, and also some of that knowing that sometimes, depending on the community, it might take a season of you just learning. It might take a season of you just listening. and just learning how to better your craft, and then your time will come. I always say proceed as the way opens. Certain doors will open as long as you stick to it. And if, like I said, if you're blessed to have a mentor, if you're blessed to have somebody who's a little bit more advanced, stick to them, ask them the questions, and I believe that you'll find a kindred spirit that's more like you than you might expect at the first.
Daniel, if I may, really quickly, I agree everything that you just said, Reverend Wes, but I think too, for those young folks who are looking just to figure things out, history has always shown us, I'm a firm believer in history. And when you look back at our nation's history, you had the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you had the Congress of Racial Equality, you had NAACP youth councils, young folks who have always had their hands on the freedom plow, who have always dared to accept the status quo and to challenge this country and their communities to answer the call for justice. So I think too, is just jumping out there, taking that leap of faith, and things will open and things will come. So I don't think there's ever an age of when you should start serving or when you can be great. Your greatness starts now. Those gifts that you have been blessed with and those talents that you have, use them. And again, to Wes's point, those folks, you'll align with the folks that you're supposed to align with, and you'll be able to build and dream. But also, every no that you get, there's a yes out there. But also, I have to understand, you have to redefine what that no looks like. A no does not necessarily mean what we think it means. A no, in my opinion, means it's a next opportunity out there. And so that next opportunity will always unveil itself when the moments come. So to those young folks who have been out here pushing and daring to lead and continue, and to those of us who are sitting on the sidelines, great thing about a movement, there's a role for everyone. There's a role for those who be on the front line. There's roles for those to be on the back scene. It's a movement is a fluid thing, and it allows us to all jump in and leave whenever we see fit. So understand that if you want to see the change, sometimes we have got to be that change that we're seeking in our communities.
Okay. Our next.
I have a comment briefly. And thank you for the invitation. But in terms of the youth, I just want to piggyback, so to speak, on the importance of history, and a youth, and how we have come thus far as a people. I think there's a great benefit to tapping into the wisdom of the years. And there's also, but that's a two-way street. As elders, we rely on the energy and the innovation of our youth. There's a book by John Lewis, I don't have it handy, but it's called Across That Bridge. And in that book, what he highlights is the training that was involved in equipping young people in the organizations previously mentioned to be activists. And the reality is, in some level in America, as Black men, we know that the country created a race. That's just the way it was established. But we have established ourselves as a people. And generation to generation, we just have to keep being involved in what Ta-Nehisi Coates refers to as the beautiful struggle. And one quote that I always remember was Frank Balance was doing a speech, and he said, from generation to generation, we're soldiers in this army. We have to fight, although we have to cry. We have to hold up the bloodstained banner. We have to hold it up until we die.
All right. John Wright, if you could lead us on to the next topic.
Of course. So our next topic will be financial literacy. Mr. Andy Cook will give us his best steps for all men and women to work toward being financially literate.
Great, thank you, John. So we could spend a whole semester on this. I'll go through this quickly, just some highlights, some basics that I think, regardless of what particular investment you choose on any given day, that you follow these fundamentals and you'll be fine. Number one, and this is pretty standard, straightforward, easy stuff that you probably already know, but one is live within your means. One rule of thumb is 50-30-20, 50% of your budget for living expenses. So that's your housing, groceries, 30% for your recreation, your fun. By the way, eating at a restaurant goes in the 30% category, not the 50% category. Groceries goes in the 50% category, and then 20% for saving and giving. And one of the benefits of that is if you live that way, you're going to create some financial margin for mistakes, for unexpected things. Pastor Morris talked about acts of service. Well, you will have financial margin to be able to contribute to those areas of service that are important to you. Next, have an emergency savings. This varies depending on what your obligations are, what your age is, but generally 6 to 12 months of expenses is one common rule of thumb. Try to keep debt outside your home to a minimum. If you've got that financial margin, that's a whole lot easier to do, because if you've got that margin, you've got that savings, something unexpected comes up, you've got the money for it. And then secondly, for those long-term goals, investing systematically on a monthly basis, something we call dollar cost averaging. That's just a quick and dirty of your own personal financial household situation. Let me just jump into investing real quick, John. And there is a Warren Buffett said, never risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. So I just talked about systematic investing. That's known as dollar cost averaging. And so that's just investing the same amount of money every month and putting it into some investment or group of investments. If those of you who participate in a 401k or a 403b plan, you're doing that right now. And that can bring down your average cost of investing. So that's a good way to avoid volatility like we're going through this year. I mean, I've had lots of discussions this year, deep discussions with folks because it's a very challenging investing environment. Have the right expectations. Volatility is a given if you're going to invest in the stock market, and actually this year, even the bond market. But the key in understanding volatility is when something you own that's high quality is down in value, don't turn a temporary situation into a permanent loss. If it's an investment of quality, if it's down in value, that's a temporary situation. If you sell it at that point, you've turned it into a permanent loss. Another gentleman who wrote a book called The Psychology of Money, his name is Morgan Housel. I recommend that book. He said to view volatility as a fee, not a fine. So if I go down, I'm in Raleigh. If I go to downtown Raleigh and park, dollars to donuts, I'm going to pick a no parking zone to park. It's hard to find parking space in Raleigh unless you go into one of the decks. So if I get a ticket, then all right, I'm being punished for parking in that wrong space. On the other hand, if I work downtown and my employer might have a deal where, hey, you pay this fee every month and you can have this parking space, and that might be a great parking space for me. So I'm willing to pay that fee. That's the price I've got to pay for having that spot that's convenient. Volatility is the price that we pay as investors for being invested in the market. Another thing I would say is don't always follow the crowd. I had to have a tough conversation with the son of a client of mine who took a large amount of money last summer and put it in AMC theaters, Bitcoin, and a third investment that I can't remember. He lost. It was the whole meme thing. So this guy is following the advice of people he's never met before, and he lost about 50 grand. So don't follow the crowd. There's also there's a Nobel Prize laureate by the name of Dan Kahneman, and he talked about the seduction of pessimism. So the thing about it's an inherited, it's really an evolutionary trait that we have, where the person who's telling us don't go there, that's not safe, that tends to get our attention more than the person who says, hey, there's an opportunity over there, you should chase that. The next thing, and remember that in doing that progress often happens a lot more slowly than setbacks. So you have to be patient. This has already come up a little bit, and that's understanding the motives behind where you get your information. Pastor Morrison and Brian Wright both talked about what is the truth. And so it used to be, when we got most of our news from a few stations on TV and we got newspapers once or twice a day, the people delivering the news felt like, okay, I need to be balanced because, half the people might have this viewpoint and half that viewpoint. So I want to be balanced. Well, that's not, that could be a whole nother topic in itself. But the bottom line is, it used to be about giving us information, and now it's a lot more about engagement. So before, a lot of media was just, they were doing what they needed to do to sell ads. And that's still very much the case. But now with social media, and again, I think it was Pastor Morris brought this up, that it is about engagement. It's not, I need to get your eyeballs on what I'm talking about, so that you will then share it with somebody else, or you'll like it, or you'll retweet it, or whatever. So it is understand that the person delivering that information, just make sure you understand what their motives are, and that will keep you out of trouble. The other is the power of compounding. This again comes down to being patient and knowing that it can take time. Here's a quick example of the power of compounding. John, I'll ask you. I come to you on January 1st, and I say, okay, here's the deal, John. I'll give you $10 million today. All right. That's option one. Option two is, I'll give you $1 today, and I'll give you $2 tomorrow, and I'll double it each day for a month, and then I'm going to stop. Are you going to take the dollar doubling every day, or are you going to take the $10 million on day one?
I want the 10 million on day one.
I don't blame you. That's what I would do. However, if you double the dollar every day for 31 days, at the end of the month, you're going to have $1,073,742,000. Now, I'm sorry I can't make that deal with you, John. But and here's the other thing: is the reason, an example of how time is important. If you delay for a week, let's say that let's say you decide to take the $1 a day, John. Okay, but it's winter break. You're out of town. You're not going to be back till January 8th. Just delaying 1 week reduces that amount, not to $500 million, not to 100 million. It reduces it to $8.3 million, just that 1 week delay. So compounding is a powerful force. The sooner you start, when I talk to retired people about who are living a really good life and say, how did you do it? They started early and they kept at it. Okay. And then, a lot of these basics, these rules don't change. Math doesn't change. Okay. And so when someone comes to you and says, listen, I promise you, This investment will pay you 1% a month. Every month, you will have no downside risk. All right, would you take that investment? Well, a lot of very wealthy, very smart people did. The guy who sold him that investment used to live up in Butner. His name was Bernie Madoff. Okay. So he was, and some people got out because they recognized that it didn't make sense, right? There was not the math just didn't make sense. So sorry if I dragged on, John, but that's my, I could go on and on. I'll stop there. All right.
Before we transition to our final two topics, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Cook?
Yes, I wanted to mention one thing, or at least ask one thing. Mr. Cook, when you are, let's say, paying your bills, is it better to get your money off your debit card, so I go ahead and pay this bill? Or would it be better to pay that bill on your credit card, since your credit card, that money is insured? What's your take on that, paying money out as far as using your credit card or taking it from the actual money itself?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that depends on the personality of the individual. And the reason I say that is when I was younger, I did not have the discipline, because I was a fool. I did not have the discipline to pay off that credit card on a monthly basis. Okay. And so those little charges that I put on the credit card would build up over time. Now today, again, like I may have alluded to earlier, I married up. All right. And so one important thing of fatherhood, by the way, is choose the wife who will be a good mother, because having a great mother to partner with you, you need a partner in that job. It's a big job. You need a great partner. And Brian, I know you chose well also.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
So we're together on this, and we make sure that anything that goes on that credit card, we pay off when the bill comes due. So but for the younger me, I would have to put it on debit, because otherwise it would, or write a check or what have you.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Cook? Okay, so our final two topics will be combined. These two topics are effective communication and the characteristics of a man. After all of our panelists speak, we will open the floor to 4 questions and comments from all participants.
If Mr. Rodgers, if you could just share a little bit about that effective communication, because I know your organization is centric, your business is centric in that, with relationships and fatherhood. So if you could just speak about how to have effective communication as a man.
Was that?
Who was that for? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, Mr. Rodgers, if you could do that, if you could do it.
You're breaking up. Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. So Daniel's breaking up a little bit. He asked if you could start us off with effective communication.
Okay, got you. What I've learned in about effective communication is, first of all, to figure out how you effectively communicate. A lot of times that's just a broad statement, and we all, as I found in being married almost 15 years, that we communicate differently. For instance, when my wife and I got married back in 2007, and when we would like have an issue or something, I'm much more of an effective communicator is just speaking the way I am now. This is my strong point. That's not my wife's strong point. Her strong point is written. So if we would have an argument or a disagreement, I'm talking, I'm expressing, she's not giving me anything back, so we're not getting anywhere. But then when I would get to work and open up my email, there's a novel that she has sent me. And I was like, why didn't you just say all of this when I was at the house? So it took me some time to realize we communicate differently, but this is how she effectively communicates. And everything that she emailed me, I was able to go, oh, that's what you meant. So we had to learn, not just in relationships, but on our jobs, amongst our family, that we all do have different communication styles. Once you learn that, then you can get into some effective communication. And I can't remember who said it, but one of the best ways to be a great communicator is to be a great listener. When someone is speaking, don't always listen just to get your comeback or how I'm going to score a point. Listen to see and listen to what this person is trying to say to you, especially when it comes to relationship. I don't know how many men up here are married or participate. If you want a great marriage, you better become a great listener. And you better learn how your spouse communicates, man and woman, because it'll save you a whole lot of arguments. It'll save you a whole lot of money and time. And just to piggyback, I heard Mr. Cook say a few minutes ago that it just struck me when he said that he married up when he was talking about money. Well, if I could be transparent, so did I. We all men here, I don't have anything to be ashamed of. When I got married to my wife, I think my credit score was in the 500s. And today, the last time I checked it, it's like in the mid 725, 730 range. That's because my wife was better when it came to the finance. If I could just go back on the topic, she was much better in that. And she communicated that to me. And I had to be the recipient of that great communication. She was just better at it than me. So one of the things, just talking about finance, for you young guys up here, this is very important. Don't marry just for looks. Don't marry just for the brick house. That's nice. That's important and it has its place. But you better marry a woman that has a good head on her shoulders, a woman that is your weaknesses are her strong points. My wife is much better when it comes to finances. That doesn't make me less of a man, it makes me a smart man. Because I bring home money and we put our money together, she knows what to do with it. I used to be, well, I'll pay the bill once I get the pink notice. That was my mentality. She was just the opposite. If the bill is due on the 5th, she's going to pay it on the 1st. And she may pay, like she came to me, and I'll just get off this. She came to me the other day, she said, the bill money, I've been paying extra on the escrow, something like that, because I want to pay the house. Something like people who own house, y'all know what we're talking about. And I didn't go, well, I could have used that money to go get some Jordans, or I could have used that money to detail my vehicle. I said, oh, okay. Because first of all, she was honest. She communicated it to me. Since we're talking about communication, she was honest. She was what she said, there was no comeback I could say to that because it made sense. I listened to what she said before I came back with my rebuttal. So communication, be a great listener if you want to be a great communicator. And, if your spouse is better when it comes to the finances, let them handle it. If your spouse, for my man, I'm speaking to my relationship people up here. If your spouse is better when it comes to the kids and homework, let him or her do that also. Just communicate. The best communication is to communicate. That's for my young brothers up here. Before y'all get married, take these lessons and soak them in like a sponge, because it'll save you a lot of time and headaches.
Pastor Morris, if you would like to add anything to that.
I wouldn't add too much more, because that would be another thing, over communicating. And that is something that I know well as a pastor. But I will say this, that I did learn a lesson, and this is a way, and I work in recovery communities, and how do you recover from going wrong? And the example that I was given is driving down the highway. That there's these bumpers on the side, and they make a sound, and they go boom, 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 if you're getting too close. And the issue is not just getting off of that and getting back on to the correct path. Often the issue is overcorrecting and going over into another lane. And so I would just raise that our one of our ways of communicating is, what is the communication of repair? That is forgiveness, it is grace, it's being able to be patient. And when you're in the the doghouse, I guess, since we're in this forum, or you're in one of those spaces where you messed up or you made an error, how do you deal with that space too? Because you have to not only be gentle with others, but learn how to be gentle with yourself. That has been a big challenge on how we interpret what we call a misstep or a failure. It doesn't mean that we just beat ourselves up and just lay into us and lose our confidence or our self-esteem. Understand that there is repair language, recovery language, and how you communicate what you need is so important. If you need some downtime, you need to step away, communicate that. Don't just withdraw and isolate without being able to say that. That is some of the most hardest, most difficult things to do. Even though I say it sounds like, oh yeah, you can just say what you mean, say what you feel. It gets a little bit more complex than that, as you've heard. And so I would just say, be kind to yourself as you are learning, and learning is a forever process. So that means you have to be kind to yourself forever. And we learn that by first accepting grace from God. For me, that's one of the ways I learned. How do we accept our own forgiveness, and how do we forgive others?
Mr. Cook, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I would just say this, if you believe that the way that we grow is by surrounding ourselves and talking to people who have different ideas than we do, that is how we learn and how we stretch, then I think one of the important things is to when you're talking to someone, and I agree with all the stuff about listening well, and try to understand where the person is coming from, first of all, especially if they have a different opinion from you, and assume the best of their intentions. I think one of the ways that social media is really destroying our ability to communicate and grow well is because where people are just dashing off responses and rebuttals and criticisms and not engaging in conversation. So in your communication, whether it's verbal or written or whatever, really try to understand where the person is coming from, assume the best of their intentions, and then you'll get much further. That's all.
Next on the list, I would like to go into the characteristics of a man. And if my father or Mr. Swanson would like to add anything, please do that now.
Well, the characteristics of a man, exactly what I would say is the characteristics based on his character. And of course, what makes his character is going to be what he was fed, how he was raised, what he was taught, what he's seen is right and what is wrong. And the character of a person, it's a difficult thing, I guess, to kind of put it in a bottle. But if you want to say what's the best aspects of a person, it's going to be his character. I know that sounds like I'm talking right back over what I just said, but the characteristics of a man, you need to be honest, hardworking, truthful, and accountable. If someone can depend on you to give them the truth, if someone can depend on you to show up at this job when you said, because you came and applied for the job, if someone can depend on you when you told them they were going to help, you was going to help them do a said task, that you showed up and did the task, that to me are marks, great marks for a man. Him to be accountable, him to show the love, not only for what he likes to do, but for his family, his wife, and be accountable to them, being that father and that dad that he should be. So I think some of those are the major characteristics I find out here lately. Even at my job, we are seeming to find younger people who have applied for the job, but won't come to work. And you're like, well, you asked for the job, here's the job. So there again, it speaks to their character of what was sown in them. So if I could sow anything to any of you young men here, is to be accountable, to be dependable, reliable, and a man of your word, and own up to your responsibilities. If you have a child, raise your child, be there for the child. If you have a wife, love your wife and be there for your wife. And then be that pillar in the community that you want to be and can be. But it's your choice if you're going to do it.
Mr. Swanson, would you like to add anything?
I agree what your father just said. And so I'm learning with that wisdom, it's best to always listen. So I'm good. Thank you.
Would any other panelist in this call like to add anything?
I would real quick. When we talk about character, it's really, to me, how you carry and you conduct yourself when no one is around to see it. When you don't have to be, like, for instance, my work schedule and who I report to, my work time is 7 to 4. Because of the job and the nature where I am, my supervisor doesn't know when I get to work and he doesn't know when I leave, but I do. I know I get there every day before 7 and I don't leave until 4. That's character. Character is how you carry and conduct yourself when no one is around to see it. And that's an important lesson because it will get you much further in life than degrees, than who you know, than how you look, even your gifts and talents, because that stuff can wear off, and it does wear off. It wanes. You're not going to always be youthful. As some of the fathers out here, your knees won't always work the way they work now. None of you young men are wearing glasses. You don't have any glasses on, but you soon will. So all of that vain stuff, it goes away, but your character will be with you until the day they put you in the ground. So make sure that you conduct yourself and carry yourself in a way that even if no one is watching, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing what I'm like. I think your dad said, if you're supposed to be at work, come to work, regardless of who's watching you. And that's what being a man is. It's not about your muscles. It's not about your money. It's not about your name or your prestige. How do you conduct yourself when no one is watching? That's character. And if you all can grasp that at a young age, you'll go far in life.
Would anybody else like to add anything?
And I feel like I'm running off at the lip, but I just had one other thing I did want to say, and it's about what we're doing here today and what we just got through talking about, and that's communication. We all need to grasp and just see how big and how strong that word is, because I'm sure the pastor could correct me if I'm wrong. The first thing when God spoke to Adam, he communicated to him, as what he wanted and what he wanted to be done. We're talking here now, communication. Communication is so important, how you communicate to people and how you receive communications. And I just think that word is almost a supernatural word because it has so many things that it touches and reaches. And I just think we need to always grasp that communication, to be honest and to be willing to listen to who's saying what and telling who what you want them to hear.
Any other comments before I turn it back over to Daniel?
One last quick comment, just thankful again for this opportunity. I host a call every second Saturday that actually brings Black men together, a time of healing. And one thing that I've heard over and over and over again, and out of that verse that Brother Wright just mentioned, is that out of all of that chaos actually came order. And so there will be seasons where it might be chaotic. I won't put that on anybody, but if anybody's been living long enough, those seasons come. So there's a little motto that says confusion, clarity, confusion, and then clarity again. And so wherever you're at in your phase and in your cycle of life, I just want to give you a lot of respect. And I'm humbled by the opportunity that, a person like me that comes in, how I come in, gets the chance to share with so many bright minds. And when we speak, we don't control what comes back to us, but we do get to choose and control how we speak. And so I'm thankful for that and thankful for this opportunity again.
Any other comments? Well, at this time, I will turn it back over to Daniel.
All right. I wanted to say thank you to all of our participants for today. Just for you to take an hour out of your day, out of your nice Saturday, to be able to fellowship with us all today, to be able to be immersed in the knowledge and experience of others, of strong men in our lives, right? We have Father's Day coming tomorrow, Juneteenth coming up, so many important holidays, but we just have to make sure we set some time aside to be able to pour in ourselves. We pour out so much as men, especially the fathers in the building. You pour out so much, but what time, what energy do you give back to yourself? What time or what do you allow to be able to refill yourself? And so this is why I do these different calls, these hour to empowers, the in-person events that I do. This is why I do it. So the people that pour out so much has that time and space to be refilled. And we can't be caught lacking on E. So we got to always refill ourselves. This will be the closing of this episode, the hour to empower the man in me. We had so many great topics. I want to say thank you to all of the panelists, Mr. Rodgers, Mr. Wright, Mr. Cook, Mr. Swanson, and Reverend Morris. And thank you, John Wright, my brother from another mother, for moderating this event. I truly appreciate all your support and everyone that was able to come out today and be the bridge to connect hope and unity. And I'm glad that y'all did that today, and I hope you enjoyed. And so I will be sending out a follow-up email later this afternoon to all the participants who joined. So just be checking your email for that from mescholars@gmail.com. So once again, I'm Daniel Bryant, the owner and creator of Me, Motivated and Empowered. And I want to say thank you for joining. Have a nice day.
Thank you for having me.